Why is this one November 1st, you might be asking? Well, initially, for the Halloween video of this year, I went with, oh, the husks in Xenoblade 3 are sort of like skeletons, so we'll do that. And then I ended up with a video where I came up with an actual kind of decent point, but I wasn't happy with how it turned out, and only half the video was actually about husks in the first place. So I'm definitely gonna put that one on the back burner for a bit until I can better properly organize my thoughts. And this video spawned out of a one-off joke I made in that one, and I think this is way funnier and a lot closer to the Halloween spirit anyway, so we're gonna go with this, even if it's a little late. As such, this video will contain spoilers for Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed, and somewhat by extension, Xenoblade 1 and 2, though I won't directly talk about those games. Alright, I hope it's kind of evident already, but I'm not meaning this in the sense of like an actual versus battle type thing. I'm more going on a there will be comedic character interactions because of this, just because power levels in Aionios are high enough where if you take the generic concept of zombie horde, they're not really going to have a particularly hard time with it. It's more so just the idea that basically everyone living in Aionios would have no touchstone for the concept of zombies in the first place. We don't see it anywhere in Xenoblade 1 and 2, but I think just based on the amount of different real-world cultures that have stories and folklore similar enough to the current Western idea of the zombie, that we can reasonably assume that the original worlds of Bionis, Mechanis, and Allrest did have something along those lines as well, that we just never saw in those games because why would we have a reason for them to explain something about that in front of us? But the thing about that is, there's little place for Aionios culture to develop that, and this isn't just a Keves and Agnes thing, this is going even for the people of the city and even Mobius. And that's just because the concept of a reanimated human corpse just isn't going to come up in a world where human corpses work differently. And husks appear to become petrified instead of decomposing, so if there is any tale of husks moving past around the Keves and Agnes barracks, it's probably not going to resemble what we would consider to be a zombie. And I actually did go and check every instance of the word husk in the entire text of the English version of Xenoblade 3, and I don't think there's anything like that in the first place. So that means Aionios is kind of able to sidestep a lot of the psychological horror that comes from a zombie outbreak, simply because they'd just be confused that such an entity could exist in the first place. Now, X, Y, and Z probably have access to enough origin memory to be able to sort of suss out what's going on, but I could see most of the rest of Mobius just being concerned that something's showing up in the world that they didn't create, and then thinking, hey wait, aren't these zombie things just sort of a worse version of us? We get new powers, a great power boost, and to keep our mental faculties, so why is this even a thing? Society has evolved past the need for zombies. And like, yeah, if we're being boring, they could probably use the control they have over Origin to sort of bend the will of the zombie hordes to them, especially if Kavesi and Agnians get infected because they can just do the iris control thing on them. And if something like this was to appear in Aionios in the first place without just kind of being dumped there by the conduit or something, it would probably be the result of Y screwing up an experiment, because he just is that kind of mad scientist. He's like a more anime, less ethical version of Victor Frankenstein, so there you go, we got another Halloween thing in here. But I think the way funnier thing to happen would be all of the consoles' eyes swerve to the kids seated in the back of the classroom, and it's Yorin, and they're like, hey wait, is this one of your things? This kind of seems along the line of what your stuff can do. Are you secretly the most powerful Mobius of all time? Have you been holding out on us? And I don't know why, but I feel like this would be a big renaissance of Dirk memes because of Dirk being upset at maybe not being the stronger one in the interlink anymore. But that's assuming we're talking about main game timeline. What if we went back to Future Redeemed? Because at that time we knew there were a lot more Origin avatars around, so people with their memories from the original worlds. While I don't think Shulker Rex encountered anything along these lines between the end of Xenoblade 1 and 2 and the start of 3, they'd probably be able to put 2 and 2 together and realize that whatever's going on is similar to a story that they heard back in their old world, and would be able to get the Liberators through fairly smoothly. I'm gonna be real, they have Riku. He's probably also a trained exorcist on top of everything else, and while he's not powerful enough to do anything about Mobius himself, individual zombies, probably okay. Could he retrofit the Ouroboros stone to make a machine to break whatever thing is keeping them moving? Honestly, maybe. If you think about how Guernica's Ouroboros stone worked, it emitted an aura that altered something mentally with the 6 party members to turn them into Ouroboros because it actively changed their iris, which means if you retooled it to, instead of doing something with Ouroboros power, it did something with like electrical signals that shut down whatever's reanimating the body without proper brain activity, I feel like that's a thing he could do. The future redeemed zombie movie is just buying enough time for Riku to figure out how to change the Ouroboros stone to do that, and then getting it up to a high enough point where you can affect most of Aionios from it. Sorry if you wanted a multiverse crossover, but there's your Xenoblade Warriors plot idea right there. Just have it be non-canon and have more party members from Xenoblade 1 and 2 be avatared into Aionios, then have N and M fully betray Mobius at that time instead of waiting 1,000 years, so you can have them and other older incarnations of other party members from 3 together, and you got your whole roster and a lot of your generic grunt enemies, which I think is a lot more environmentally conscious than making you fight like 300 Arden at once. As for the boss though, yeah, it's absolutely Matthew. There's no way he of all characters is not getting bitten at least once. Just look at his introduction in Future Redeemed. He uses Ouroboros power to a degree that might have set Mobius off to their location, and that's after being told not to do that multiple times by A. So as physics-defyingly good as A's processor is, and how it could very, very easily decipher exactly how the rules of whatever this type of zombie is work, and how to properly deal with them and stay safe, I don't think it would be fast enough to prevent Matthew from Leroy Jenkinsing his way in, just because it took A, Shulk, Rex, and character development to get him to stop doing that. Granted, he tends to not actually get hit in cutscenes very much, so there is a good chance he would just win the fight against whatever group of zombies he jumped into, but the idea of just zombie Matthew with zombie Ouroboros gauntlets, waiting for Kavesian Agnians to get infected, and then using the zombie Ouroboros gauntlets to make a zombie Ouroboros is just extremely funny to me. And like, how far can we extrapolate this exactly? Assuming the first zombies are humans or humanoid, what would happen if other creatures in Aionios eventually start getting bitten? If we work our way up the food chain to unique monsters, could we theoretically have a very, very big one bite what's left of one of the Xenoblade 2 titans, and if it can pierce all the way through the carapace, would that work? Could we get massive zombie Oriya flopping around the entire south half of Aionios? Perhaps more importantly, if we've got Riku being the tech guy, and Shulk already has a prosthetic arm, does he end up with the Ash Williams chainsaw arm on top of everything? Because replica Monado chainsaw goes extremely hard. And speaking of technology-related things, I know we just extrapolated up to try and find the height that serial escalation of this concept could reach, but what if just the mechanics of how the zombies work are incompatible with Aionios, so it's really, really hard to infect some people? Because if we go with the idea where you need to get bitten to get turned, what if you're a Machina? I'm going to assume that Lanz has tougher skin than Noah, even if it's the exact same thickness, simply because it seems like it's metal? Do we have a rock, paper, scissors thing going here? Like, does zombie Noah need to bite Mio, so then Mio can successfully bite Lanz? If zombie Uni uses her head feathers as fletching on an arrow, and then zombie Juniper hits you with that, is that enough to count? Is Izzard tired enough looking already, where the zombies will already think he's one of them and completely avoid him? These are all questions that can be asked. And then if it's just a bite thing or a virus thing, there are ways to just completely avoid that. And I'm not talking about getting an Aleveness or something like that. I'm saying if an Ouroboros gets bitten, I don't think that's going to work, since as far as we can tell, the bodies are just ether constructs. And even if it does, they can de-interlink to become 2 separate people instead of 1 combined person, which would probably cancel it out. Or just do the classic chop a limb off before the infection spreads thing, and then completely regenerate that limb. The full main party of Xenoblade 3 rotating in and out of their interlink forms amongst pairs just to keep the heat level down is probably about as effective against a zombie horde as Piccolo would be, in the sense that they would need to be completely swamped to actually be in any danger. But as for Mobius, I would argue the opposite is true in a way. And that's because it seems like their console forms are less tangible in a way than their transformed or interlinked forms, because their bodies do just seem to be a construct formed around their core, and while the transformed and interlinked states probably are just that, they seem more biological in appearance compared to Ouroboros, so if there's any point where they can be affected, it would be in that state, bizarrely enough. But then, this is also a JRPG world. Does everything work on JRPG logic? It doesn't affect Mobius, who you could argue are also considered undead, but do healing ether arts negatively affect zombies? And then can we go another step further than that? Yes, we can. We can get dumber. If Mobius count as undead, and just happen to be immune to healing arts in that way for other reasons, does getting bitten by a zombie apply the zombie status effect to an undead being, and do they cancel out and make them living again? Like, yeah, we're going to gloss over the cathartic reunion with Yorin that this could cause, and just how much easier the plot of Xenoblade 3 would become if, instead of a hero in the 7th party slot, you would just have a zombie that goes around biting the Mobius after they get incapacitated by the actual fighters. What would happen if this happened to Zed? If you apply this logic to the other Mobius, then yeah, okay, the logic is very stupid, but they're one individual person. That at least makes sense. What happens if you undead someone who is a conglomeration of emotions from millions of people across 2 universes? The options are either just 1, you get some kind of horrifying chimera, or 2, Origin just completely blue screens because none of this is supposed to make sense. And seeing how the end goal of everything was just to reboot Origin in the first place, this would genuinely just sequence break Aionios and skip the part about needing to get keys from the 2 queens in the first place. Can I make this even stupider? Yes, I can make this even stupider. Because if X and Y are considered extensions of Zed's will and his avatars, then presumably this trick would work on them as well. And that means they could just end the game entirely in Chapter 5, because that's the first time they have X there in person. Do you ever directly fight X at that point in gameplay? No. But what does happen there is the Mio M switcheroo. Since only 1 hit wins in this scenario, and X was as confused by the switcheroo as N was, Mio could just hold on to a zombie head as if it were the head of Medusa, and just sneak up behind X once, and then the game just completely ends there. M's homecoming never happens, nobody has their awakening, nobody ever ends anything with X, Y, or Z, or Yorin and Dirk, nobody meets the queens, the party genuinely just does not learn about Origin and how the world came to be. They just wake back up in their bodies in the original world, and I'm gonna be real, without that last bit of bonding that they have in the last couple chapters, which seem to last canonically a lot longer than the earlier bit, because Mio's not on a time limit anymore, are their emotions even strong enough to interlink the worlds after that? Does the Xenoblade 3 Zombie Apocalypse AU end with what was in-universe the expected ending of Xenoblade 3, albeit after taking an extremely stupid and circuitous route to get there? Very possibly. The question then is, since we've obviously established that Riku just completely ends the scenario where it occurs during Future Redeemed, if it happens during the main game, would that be enough for him to break character and actually speak up? Because something like this would be far outside even Riku's planning. Do we have him speedrunning the explanation of how the world works anyway, just because everyone needs to be on the same page so he can fully explain the plan? Because obviously, Riku would be the one to figure all of this out before anyone else in the party would. So, he would be the mastermind behind both scenarios. I don't think there was particularly any point to this video, but if we've learned anything from it, it's that even the harshest of zombie apocalypses is nothing compared to the most common variety of Napon. I am genuinely in awe that I managed to BS this entire video out of the one concept, but there are a lot of really stupid ways you can extrapolate this, as I believe you've now seen ample evidence of. I could go further, but I need other Halloween videos in the future, so we're gonna do that at a different date. I managed to out-stupid an April Fool's video on this one, and that's good enough for me. So, until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.